While researching our family's ancestry, we found that we can't trace our family tree back very far, and there's a lot of missing information, including much on Mom and Dad's earliest years. What we do have are lots of photos and film clips Ruth and Ted saved that document their love story and how life revolved around our nuclear family. This is the story we're sharing, with a little history thrown in. Dad's family were from England. His great-grandfather, E. Dawson, wrote and directed burlesque shows in London. Dad's father, Edward Sidney, won many trophies as a young champion bicyclist in one of the many cycling clubs in London. Dad's mother, Martha, who we called Granny, was the second of 11 children. She hinted at stories of high society and the sacrifices her family made when her father married a young woman who worked in a pickle factory. Granny claimed that her father was well-educated, spoke 8 languages, and was raised to be an ambassador. She also told us about an elegant carriage that would drop off baskets for the holidays every year. Edward and Martha came to New York City through Ellis Island from London with the Charlie Chaplin vaudeville troupe. She a corps dancer, and he, the former bicycle champion, a backstage electrician and self-taught pianist. Dad, an only child, was born September 17, 1913 in Hell's Kitchen, New York. Martha and Edward left New York City following Charlie Chaplin's decision to also try their luck in movies in Hollywood. For reasons we'll never know, this didn't work out for them, and they settled in San Diego. Granny's sister, Lottie Atherton, who came to New York City a couple of years after Martha and Edward, found vaudeville success tap dancing on a suspended box while standing on her head. She claimed to have taught Bojangles a tap dance routine up and down stairs. Mom's maternal great-grandparents, the Andersons, were early settlers in Indiana. Her mother, Marie, was a homemaker, and her father, Charles, was a doctor, a mailman, an author, and a mason in the Masonic Temple. Mom was born on May 30th, 1913. And she had an older brother, Ron, whom, for unknown reasons, she wasn't very close with. Ruth and Ed met at age 17 in high school in San Diego. It was a challenging upbringing for Mom, who at 18 developed tuberculosis and spent 2 years in Arizona convalescing. During this time, Dad was sent to New York to stay with Auntie Lot for a while, we think because Granny wasn't that crazy about Mom. It was a frustrating life for Dad. In addition to being an only child, Granny had a thyroid condition that Dad explained was the cause of her having an erratic temperament. She raised Dad with impeccable British manners, and he made every effort to pass these manners on to us. Dad's parents divorced in 1924. Dad, as an 11-year-old boy, had to painfully testify against his father in court. Dad started college at San Diego State, and he bartendered at the U.S. Grant, one of the nicest hotels in the city. Mom's health improved, and she resumed a happy life in San Diego. It wasn't too long until Mom and Dad got back together. Dad joined the Army in 1945, bonding with Army buddies and experiencing the horrors of war on Okinawa.
Some sunny day, keep smiling through, just like you always do, till the blue skies drive the dark clouds far away. So will you please say hello to the folks that I know? Tell them I won't be long. They'll be happy to know that as you saw me go, I was singing this song. We'll meet again, don't know where, don't know when, but I know we'll meet again some sunny day. We'll meet again, don't know where, don't know when, but I know we'll meet again some sunny day. Keep smiling through, just like you.
Mom was the base commander's secretary at McClellan Air Force Base in Sacramento.
So will you please say hello to the folks that I know?
Dad suffered from survivor syndrome, and he implored Mom to not wait for him. He felt he was an undeserving bum, and he'd feel guilty the rest of his life. He didn't feel worthy of her affections. She felt otherwise. Mom was in a local paper showing the censored mail she'd get back from Dad, the information officer. Dad sent Mom stuffed monkeys throughout their 14-year courtship, and she kept them all. They married in 1948. Dad re-enlisted and joined Armed Forces Radio in the Philippines. He loved being a disc jockey for the troops, and he found out he was pretty good at it. Mom and Dad were stationed briefly in Japan before being sent back to the United States. Dad was stationed in San Diego. Then they went to March Air Force Base. Dad had a brief transfer to Arizona. We kids and Mom spent a brief time in New York while Dad was finding housing in Kadena, Okinawa.
Hello, Daddy. We're in a merry-go-round place. There's lots of noise here, and Debbie isn't with us, so it's just Patty and Eddie and Mommy saying hello. And we're so anxious to see you and hope you get our house real soon. You want to say goodbye to Daddy, Eddie? Throw him a kiss.
This is Patty Dawson singing the U.S. Air Force Blues. Here she goes. They took the blues from the skies and the pretty girl's eyes and such a whole story too. And give it to the man who carry where the U.S.
Dad served 2 tours in Okinawa. We were stationed on Kadena Air Force Base first, moved back to the mainland for a year, then back to Naha Air Force Base. From his achievements in Armed Forces radio and television, Dad became the editor of the base paper, and he loved it.
"55-mile-per-hour winds extend 290 miles from the center of the storm. If the typhoon continues to move as forecast, winds of over 55 miles per hour are expected to reach Okinawa by 2100 hours tonight."
We would experience seasonal typhoons on Okinawa, which we kids found really exciting. Although our parents were busy getting dry ice and candles, filling the bathtub with water, taping the windows, and moving the furniture away from the windows, we kids looked forward to canceled school, board games by candlelight, and running around outside during the eye of the storm. As children, we weren't aware of how devastating the storms could be for the local Okinawans, who didn't have the sturdy base housing we had. Seems like when we weren't just dressing up, we were dancing.
Oh, we're going to the Hooky-Law. Hooky, 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 hooky-law. Everybody loves the Hooky-Law, where the law loves the cow at the big luau. Oh, we'll throw our nets.
We moved back to California for about 9 months. We headed back to Okinawa, and this time we had Granny with us. When we settled into Naha, we had a wonderful live-in housekeeper, Emiko, who was like part of the family. We would spend family time off base exploring the island and watching exhibitions. We were cautioned not to eat anywhere that didn't have a US A or B rating posted. Life on the base meant that we saw wonderful USO musicals, and we ate $3 filet mignon and lobster meals at the non-commissioned officers club. We also loved spending time at the beaches and tide pools not far off base.
Georgie is a raccoon. He is always hungry, so he sings out "Koi, koi, koi." He will rub his head and tummy, rub head and rum tum tum. Macaroons and macaroni, jelly beans and pinks for money. Koi, 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 koi.
Dad was once again the editor of the paper, and he loved using us kids as the talent for many staged photos. We'd get into the spirit of it.
He is always hungry, so he sings out "Koi, koi, koi." Always hungry, very hungry. That's why he sings out "Koi." Georgie is a raccoon. He is always hungry, so he sings out "Koi, koi, koi." He will rub his head and tummy rub.
Ed and Deb required a certain amount of orthodontal work that wasn't available on Okinawa, so we had to take numerous plane trips to Taiwan. We remember our orthodontist had a large aquarium of piranha in the lobby. We ate meals at Madame Chiang Kai-shek's hotel, and generally we had a great time in the local parks and the beauty of Taipei, except for the fact our mouths hurt from tightened braces.
Georgie is a raccoon.
We were regulars at the base church, which served all denominations. A pulley system had first a cross, then Jesus on the cross, and finally the Star of David, readily positioned for each change of worship service. We enjoyed base activities like miniature golf. The happiest days of Dad's life were these family years on Okinawa. Dad loved every minute of his exciting job. He was appreciated and awarded for his excellent work, and we were all enjoying the local culture and lifestyle on this beautiful island. As if our lives couldn't be any happier, we now had Bootsy, our boxer.
We were given our little puppy by our good friend, Sergeant Saint, just before he left for the States. And she was only about a foot long at that time, the sweetest little thing.
The air base housing was like a gated community. We felt completely safe, and we moved around freely.
泣きながら歩く一人ぼっちの夜
And aside from judo and other activities, there was always time for more dancing.
East side, west side, all around the town. The kids sang Ring a Rosie, London Bridge is falling down. Boys and girls together, me and Mamie O'Rourke tripped the light fantastic on the sidewalks of New York.
Down in front of Casey's, remember the old wooden stoop? On a summer's evening, we would form a merry group. Boys and girls together, we would sing and waltz while Tony played the organ on the sidewalks of New York.
East side, west side, all around the town. The kids sang Ring Around Rosie, London Bridge is falling down.
Boys
And girls together,
me and Mamie O'Rourke
tripped the light fantastic on the side.
Our air raid drills during school days required walking to underground shelters to wait it out, a stark contrast to the duck and cover crouching under a desk that we experienced once we were back in the States. When it was time to come back to the States, it was too complicated to bring Bootsy, so we left him as a mascot with a local Marine base. We kids remember watching him, surrounded by happy Marines, growing smaller from the back window of the car as we drove away. When we returned to Southern California in the early 1960s, we'd already had some exposure to Elvis, the Four Seasons, and the Beatles, but we definitely had some cultural catching up to do. Adding to that, we were suddenly living in tract housing in Sunnymead, outside of March Air Force Base, next to a vacant potato field with tumbleweeds, and without the services and affordable lifestyle we'd grown accustomed to overseas. And we were now living through the significant and tragic events happening in our country. In 1965, Dad was briefly stationed at Andrews Air Force Base in Washington, D.C., and he left us with Mom in Sunnymead. During this time, he saved his tip money from bartending at night, and he sent us a squirrel monkey. We'd always heard tales of his monkey during his early years in the armed forces, and we knew he wanted us to share this unique experience. Unfortunately, the monkey was a little too wild, and after he bit Pat, resulting in a tetanus shot, Mom gave him to a pet shop. When Dad returned to us from Andrews, he retired from the Air Force and joined the Civil Service, finding work on the Norton Air Force Base paper. Dad seemed to hit a depression in this new chapter of his life, but he always found relief by watching his favorite comedians on TV, taking us to the base theater to watch foreign films, or getting lost in his reading. We already had a parakeet, but shortly after Dad returned from Andrews Air Force Base, we got our newest member of the family, Laddie. Once we settled into life in Sunnymead, we often spent a Saturday or Sunday taking a 5-hour round-trip family drive to visit Granny in San Diego. Dad would refer to Granny as Lady Veer de Veer because of her aristocratic demeanor. In her tiny, immaculate home, she'd serve us her British food favorites like oxtail soup and beef drippings, and she'd teach us how to play canasta and poker. For outings, she'd take us to wrestling matches where she'd holler things like, "Get the bum!" from ringside, and then she'd insist we get their autographs. The cost of living was dramatically higher than it was on Okinawa, and we had more than one mortgage on the house. Mom, who had once been a highly regarded personal secretary, became the Moreno Valley High School librarian, and eventually she drove the bookmobile. Mom's favorite outlet was pizza and bingo at the Non-Commissioned Officers Club, where she'd play 5 cards while crocheting. She always loved musicals, barbershop quartets, and crooners, and the 3 of us learned to appreciate some of this same music variety because of her. In addition to the 3 of us having good grades in school, Ed studied photography, while Pat and Deb were busy in the art department. We had wonderful friends and active social lives while we were unaware of Mom and Dad's financial hardships. Somehow they made it possible for us to stay in fashion and keep up with our peers despite limited resources. And as hard as he tried, Dad struggled with 60s culture.
Monday, so good to me. Monday morning, it was all I hoped it would be. Monday morning couldn't guarantee that Monday evening you will still be here with me.
Mom developed breast cancer in 1971, and her doctor warned that she might only have a few weeks to live. She proved him wrong and hung in for a full year. Mom's mother passed away the evening before she did. Pat painted a portrait of Mom that was displayed at the memorial service for her and her mom. After Mom's death, Dad, who never had the opportunity to travel beyond where the military sent him, insisted that we 3 kids go to Europe together. Patty was in charge of which art museums to visit, Deb was in charge of languages, and Ed was in charge of finances and currency exchange. So in 1973, we were prepped with our Eurail passes, guidebooks, and a flexible itinerary for our 2-month adventure, which included avoiding travel to southern Italy during a cholera outbreak. On our return, Pat moved in with Granny to help take care of her until her death in 1976. Deb and Pat then moved together to New York City, where Deb attended Juilliard for dance, and Pat continued studying art. Dad made a point to come visit Deb and Pat in their New York City apartment, returning to the Hell's Kitchen area where he was born. Dad stayed on in the Sunnymead house, living a quiet and solitary life with Laddie. In 1979, Ed, who was then going to San Diego State, rushed to Sunnymead after hearing that Dad had admitted himself into the hospital after a heart attack the night before. After Ed's emotionally charged hospital visit with Dad, he left to check in on Laddie, who it turned out was suffering from kidney failure and needed to be euthanized. Ed had to quickly make this difficult decision about Dad's best pal, Laddie, only to find out when returning to the hospital that Dad had another heart attack and he passed away that same night. As young adults, we lost our parents way too soon. We often think about the events in our lives that we would have loved to have shared with them. But then we think about the many ways they influenced us and all the wonderful experiences we had during the years that we were together. Mom and Dad had a very loving and respectful relationship towards one another and seemed to value family above all else. This wasn't lost on us. Almost a half century since we lost Mom and Dad, we're all married with grown children of our own. With the golden rule etched in our hearts forever by Mom and a strong sense of humor from Dad, they also inspired us to seek out adventure, stay curious, keep an open mind, and be the best parents we could be.
The dreams that you dream of once in
Maybe our kids will do a sequel to this video someday with their version of what life has been like growing up with Ruth and Ted's 3Ds.
Bluebirds fly, and the dreams that you dream of, dreams really do come true. Ooh, someday you wish upon a star, wake up with.
Wow, that was an amazing video. What do you guys think?
I thought it was really great and it was emotional.
I thought it was wonderful, but a lot of things had to be left out. And maybe we can tell some of those stories.
All right.
I want to talk about food and the important part it played in our family and in the military. The locals on Okinawa used human waste for fertilizer, and so we weren't allowed to buy from them for sanitary reasons. And so we never got any local produce. Everything we had was canned or frozen and came from far away. And our milk and ice cream was sent over in a powdered form and reconstituted over there. This didn't help the fact that Mom was not crazy about cooking. There were many things in her life that she enjoyed more than cooking. But I can remember sitting around the table as a kid and Mom pouring out these lukewarm glasses of Tang and her telling us how wonderful and modern our dining was because of the astronauts. And Dad really enjoyed cooking, but he cooked bizarre things that kids don't like. And the worst thing I think he made was one time he bought a can of turtle soup, and that was just awful. He also tried to do things to keep us in touch, like make tacos and pizzas and things like that so we wouldn't be missing out on that. But he didn't cook very well, and I thought he invented those things. So that's my memory about food that I didn't want to leave out.
So in putting this together, we learned obviously a lot about our relatives, but more importantly, learned a lot about what influenced our mother and father, and gave us, I think, a pretty good perspective on ourselves. I used to be sort of critical of Dad, thinking that he didn't really assert himself, never reached his full potential, kind of was playing it safe and staying in the military, because I thought he was a brilliant man and could have done so much more with his life. But learning as we did, doing the work on this, he had a tough life. Parents divorcing when he was young, having a very domineering mother, and then the war. The Battle of Okinawa was one of the most horrific battles in World War II, and my dad was an infantryman, losing a lot of his very close friends. So he came out of that, I think he had PTSD, certainly survivor syndrome. He was even writing our mother saying that she shouldn't wait for him, that he was a damaged or broken man. But he did endure, and all in all, he was a great, humble, generous man that maintained a great sense of humor and curiosity and zest for life. And then we've got our mother, who was so unique, never known anybody as optimistic as she was, never a cruel word to anyone. I used to think she was kind of overly trusting and kind of naive, but perhaps because of her illness, when she was young, she really embraced life and really was appreciative of everything around her and kept this Pollyannic outlook, always finding a silver lining. So pretty good influences as for us as kids. So I feel awfully fortunate to have the family I had, even the siblings that I had, as hard as it is to admit, being the middle child with two sisters on either side. But really, we had an amazing life growing up on air bases, which was the original gated community. So we had a lot of freedom. We had bowling alleys and swimming pools and youth centers at our disposal. And growing up in different environments, and having the different cultures and customs, we really grew up in a very diverse, inclusive world. So I only hope that some of the traits and qualities I've gotten as a child, I can pass on to my kids. So we may do a sequel to this. Stay tuned.
I'm going to talk about the silver boxes that we've had for decades that Ed and Paula were kind enough to store until we could figure out what to do with them. But they had all of Mom's monkeys. They had all of this amazing footage and photographs that we were able to plow through and pull this film together and transfer this old 8mm footage that would have just either deteriorated or never been seen. And it's, amazing to us to see what incredible photographers they were and the images they captured. Anyway, so in those silver boxes, we had Dad's old, the Armed Forces Radio oversized LPs that we were able to ship to someone who wanted to transfer them for us. And we had Mom's monkey collection that we were able to send to a collector who just thought they were really cool. We had all these Life magazines we were able to pass on to someone. So our hoarding wasn't in vain, and it certainly wasn't in vain in that we were able to pull this film together. And someday maybe we'll know what to do with all of their correspondence that's sitting in the last big box. But boy, without those silver boxes, this would not have been possible.